I'm a huge fan of the tracking shot. This is where the camera physically moves through the scene and follows the subject. I believe it completely immerses the audience in the film, especially in Westerns. And in today's world, we all have access to these high-quality gimbals, so any filmmaker can get some of the same shots that we see in Hollywood films. I was actually hired to be a gimbal operator in a full Western film, so I've been doing a ton of research over the past couple months into the tracking shot on a Steadicam or gimbal. And I've been really trying to drill into what type of settings and composition and framing they use, what the stability level's at, and how wide the aperture is and what's in focus. I've got a list of shots that I think prove some of my findings, and I'm going to share with you today. Let's get into it. First, I believe it's important to note the classic Westerns from the likes of John Ford and George Stevens used a much more classic approach. They would deliberately not move the camera and have deep focus. In today's world, the tracking shot has become a much more complicated and complex component of the Western genre.
Filmmaker? Wow. Why don't we do a nice, slow tracking shot of you bringing...
A tracking shot is defined by any shot that physically moves through a scene for an extended amount of time. A tracking shot follows the subject and can be used to show off the setting or make us feel like we're in the scene as a particular character. In this scene from There Will Be Blood, Daniel's son has just been injured and he's carrying him to safety in panic. We don't know the extent of his injuries. The real-time effect you gain from the tracking shot allows us to better empathize with Daniel and feel his panic. Notice how it's one long shot with no cuts or no change in camera angle. The camera framing is not perfect, but it's relatively smooth with minimal camera shake. There is a shallow depth of field, so we're forced to focus on Daniel. We are running next to Daniel the entire time, and the audience is forced to wait for the outcome. There's a very similar shot from The Revenant. However, this tracking shot, there is much more movement and reframing, and also most of the background is in focus, revealing the setting. The camera moves in the same manner a person would turn their head to see an attacker. Now, we are uncomfortably close to the main character and can no longer see the attacker. The camera constantly moves to create fear and tension and makes the scene feel more chaotic. In both of the examples, we have one angle, the front view. What if we wanted to get multiple angles, such as behind, in front, to the side? In this scene from Hell on Wheels, the main character is looking for a fugitive, but also has dialogue with another character. This makes us feel part of the group, because we follow him at every turn. Notice how imperfect the camera movement is, at some points not even being level and rocking a little. We are constantly moving from behind the character to in front of the character. In a way, we are parallaxing around him. The parallax follow shot is another type of Steadicam tracking shot we see in Westerns. It's very similar to the hero parallax shot we discussed in my first video, but with much less dramatic effect, and it makes the scene more natural. It's what you would see if you were watching someone as they walked right by you. You start to see them walking towards you from the front, and then once they reach you, they passed you, and you would be slowly following them if they were a companion or part of the group. Now, the alternative to this method, I would call the long parallax follow shot, is to do a follow shot, but you use jump cuts instead of one scene. In this scene from Old Henry, it's a chasing scene, and we get a shot from behind him. Then we have the traditional Steadicam shot, but then it jump cuts to a side shot where he's much further away, and he almost blends into the trees. Finally, we get a front of him as we watch him take cover behind a big rock, as his attackers are just out of focus. The next thing I want to talk about is camera shot sizes. In the examples we've looked at so far, we see a cowboy shot that, of course, we're expected to see, and the typical medium shot. But in Westerns, we often see a medium close, like is in the movie 3:10 to Yuma. This movie constantly uses a generic medium close shot to give the character a more intimate feeling. The director of photography, Pheidon Michael, which doesn't view the remake as 3:10 to Yuma as a classic Western. It's more of a character drama, he says. The cinematographer would watch Westerns in preparation for production in a very similar way that I'm doing for mine. And he says that his approach is much more connected to Once Upon a Time in the West, with its look in these extreme close-ups on faces and extreme wide shots to play into the action. Notice in this shot how close the aperture is, so the entire background is in focus. The camera movement is very smooth and could almost be, and probably is on a dolly. Using the same medium close shot, the movie Bone Tomahawk does this where the camera is completely unsteady. You see, in this scene from Bone Tomahawk, the character has a terrible leg injury. So we get this unstable camera movement to amplify the difficulty of each step. Through the camera, we get a sense of what the character is going through. For this character, when he walks, he's unstable because he only has one good leg. In response to this, the cinematographer makes the camera unstable so we get to feel his point of view. Camera instability is a great way to show pain and anger. On the opposite spectrum, a tracking shot from the movie Nope was butter smooth to convey an eeriness and an emptiness in this park. The camera glides right through the gate. There's absolutely no shake, and it doesn't even feel like we're on any kind of gimbal or Steadicam. It's almost like in this scene, we're on a ride to follow this main character and try to figure out what's going on here. One of my favorites is when we're tracking a person's boots or weapon. In this scene from Hell on Wheels, we are following a man scout out for a bank robbery. We see his boots, his gun, but not his face. Here's another great clip from Old Henry where we follow the blade through the tall grass as he hunts his prey. Here's another great example from Hell on Wheels. We are tracking a subject reload his weapon. For most of the tracking shot, we are in tight on his gun until he makes the kill, and this really adds to the scene. Okay, so let's talk briefly about lens choices and what focal length I believe works for me. This is a difficult subject because every Western has that 235 anamorphic screen size, and so it's really difficult to determine if a shot's on a 50 or a 30. In fact, if you go to Shot Deck, they give it a rating, whether it's medium, close. It seems like they have a difficult time too. But I want to make one point here, is that I think generally when you're doing a movement on a gimbal, the tracking shot is more medium than you might think. If I looked up these gimbal shots, like some of my favorites on Shot Deck, and all of them are listed as a medium lens focal range. Not wide, not medium wide, not ultra wide. It's my opinion that the sweet spot on a full frame camera is around 35 to 50 mil.
That's your sweet spot right there.
Another one of the things that I really wanted to figure out is what is the ideal aperture setting for a good tracking shot. Let's assume you have a good ND filter and you don't have any exposure issues, so there's nothing to do with exposure. So the question becomes, what do you want to have in focus for the tracking shot? I think most people would say you want to be wide open so the audience can see the background clearly. However, in my research and what I found in these examples, we see the background out of focus or slightly out of focus, and the main subject, of course, is in focus. I think this looks really good, and I would certainly recommend you at least have this option readily available on your gimbal. It makes the scene more mysterious. I might do a separate video on this, but I think in Westerns, they thrive on being out of focus. In the movie The Assassination of Jesse James, Roger Deakins hired a company to create a lens where the outside of it was constantly out of focus. It had this really interesting blur or bokeh about it that I thought looked amazing. And I've actually found a lot of examples where Westerns will just have the whole frame out of focus for effect. So I tend to lean a little more towards, having something like an f2.8 or at least an f4 or a f5.6. I think I like something out of focus at all times. But there are a ton of examples where you want to use the closed aperture in a tracking shot to keep the background in focus. Here's a great example of a tracking shot from Hell on Wheels, where everyone is running away from the scene in fear as our hero runs towards the danger, which in itself looks great. Obviously, you want everything to be in focus for that because it really adds to the effect. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. Again, this is a research video. This is a research process that I'm going through where I'm just watching films, trying to find patterns and trying to be able to get on set and have a really good understanding of some of the things that the pros do to kind of add value to my cinematographer. If there's anything you see that I'm missing, please let me know below. If there's anything you'd like me to research or show in my next video, I'd also love any kind of feedback. So thanks so much for watching. I will hopefully do another one of these. Thanks again.